But you seem to know a ton of stuff. So I'm like, how are you off social media but also knowledgeable?
Google News feed and then things that informed people send me. I rely on people sending me things now, which is way better.
But I'm sure you got some psychos who are up your ass.
Who believe everything I say?
Yeah, because you're so big. You got such a big umbrella.
Yeah, but I'm very clear that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, you're one of the few guys who will go, you know what I said last week? I was wrong about that.
You have to.
Nobody does that.
That lady's smiling. If she claims victim, I call her shit. She looks like she's having a good time. Also,
Joe Rogan is right back in the spotlight, but not for something loud or chaotic this time. It's about what didn't get said, and that silence is hitting harder than any viral moment ever could. This situation isn't about a crazy clip or a heated debate blowing up online. It's about a gap, something people expected to hear but never did, and that difference is raising serious eyebrows. Rogan recently sat down with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has openly admitted to past connections with Jeffrey Epstein, even mentioning multiple flights on his plane. Normally, in today's online world, that detail alone would dominate headlines instantly. But during a long 2.5-hour conversation, the topic never came up, not once, and people definitely noticed that.
the fact that people on the left weren't outraged when they read the Twitter files and found out how much involvement there was in silencing real information and removing people who were from Stanford
the White
and
House
MIT.
ordered me to be removed from Instagram. I lost 1 million followers.
Insane.
What makes it even more interesting is Rogan hasn't been avoiding Epstein as a topic overall. In fact, he's brought it up plenty of times with other guests, including Cheryl Hines, who is closely tied to RFK Jr. That creates a sharp contrast that people can't ignore. The subject clearly isn't banned from the show. It just seems to depend on who's sitting in that chair, and once people see that pattern, everything shifts fast. Now, the audience isn't just focused on what's being talked about. They're locked in on what's being skipped. And that puts Rogan in a tricky position, because the conversation is happening on two levels at the same time. There's what you hear out loud, and then there's what's quietly being avoided behind the scenes. Before the Epstein files started getting attention again, RFK Jr. had been fairly open about those past connections.
Okay, but give the context, obviously, to the Epstein thing, because you basically got out ahead of the...
So first of all, I'm in New York for most of my life.
Yeah.
So, you run into everybody in New York. I mean, I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes. I knew O.J. Simpson came to my house. Bill Cosby came to my house.
You also knew good people.
Yeah, I did know a lot of them, but, you don't know these people are swamp creatures until all this stuff comes out.
His explanation followed a familiar path. He suggested that many people didn't fully understand Epstein's actions before the mid-2000s, framing those interactions as something that happened before the full picture was known.
My plane rides with Jeffrey Epstein, I took 2 plane rides with him. My wife knew his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, and of course, I ran across Jeffrey Epstein at parties, at fundraisers for the Robin Hood fundraiser in New York.
At the time, that argument held up publicly, and he was willing to address it directly. But things are different now. With those files back in the spotlight, anything connected to them feels more intense, more watched, and way harder to brush off casually. And in this kind of environment, saying nothing at all actually says a lot. It signals there are limits, even on a platform that built its name on having zero limits. And that's where people start questioning credibility. Rogan's whole appeal has always been that he'll go anywhere in a conversation. No filters, no traditional media rules, just raw discussion that others might avoid. That reputation is exactly what helped him build one of the biggest podcasts in the world. But here's the catch. It only works if it stays consistent. The second that consistency slips, even a little, the audience starts looking at everything differently. Now, it's not just a free-flowing conversation anymore. It starts to feel controlled, like some topics get a pass while others get quietly pushed aside.
12,000 arrests is crazy. That's a crazy amount of people go to jail for social media posts.
the framers of the Constitution, free speech was everything to them, and they put it in the First Amendment because they knew all the other rights and guarantees were dependent on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponents, it has a license for any kind of atrocity.
I mean, when you're living in a world where the government has the power to dictate what's real and what's not real, and they don't have an obligation to be correct, you got a real problem. And if there's no consequences for them being incorrect and they've silenced correct speech, they've gotten away with something that's real slippery and real dangerous. And when there's a lot of money involved and a lot of businesses involved.
Once that idea gets in people's heads, it spreads fast. Suddenly, listeners aren't just hearing what's said, they're questioning what's missing, and that shift is hard to reverse. It turns the whole experience into something more calculated, and people pick up on that energy quickly. At the same time, this isn't happening in a vacuum. There's a bigger shift going on across this same space. Other voices around him are switching things up too. Tim Dillon and Andrew Schultz, for example, have been way more direct lately, calling things out, pointing at inconsistencies, and jumping straight into topics that Rogan is now getting heat for skipping. That contrast builds pressure fast. When creators operate in the same lane, people naturally compare them. Who's speaking freely? Who's dodging certain conversations? Who's actually pushing things forward? And when those comparisons start stacking up, even small differences look huge. Right now, Rogan comes off more controlled, and people are definitely noticing that. And whether that restraint is planned, strategic, or just how things played out almost doesn't even matter anymore. What really matters is how people see it. Because online, perception beats intention every single time. Once people lock in on a certain narrative, that's the version that spreads, and it moves fast. You can already see that pressure leaking into other areas too. Rogan himself has admitted he's been struggling with everything going on, even saying he's been losing sleep over it. That's not nothing. That shows he's aware of the tension and knows things around him are shifting in ways that aren't easy to manage. But instead of that pressure showing up in the biggest, most sensitive topics, it starts popping out in smaller moments. Like his interactions with his producer, Jamie Vernon, those exchanges hit different.
Professionally.
Did you see what they just did to the guys that won the Super Bowl? Do you see the jock tax?
Yeah.
Jamie, you see the jock tax?
Yeah, it's not a new thing, though.
I understand.
not?
I understand, but but it's specific to California.
Yeah,
and this jock tax in California, some of the players lost money playing in the Super Bowl. They had to pay. Oh no, it is true.
I don't think so.
No, it is true. I went it through AI last night. No, it was in. They pulled it up on Grok, and people analyzed it, and it's based. No, Jamie. Jamie. It's based on the 7 days that they had to be there. So you have to pay a fee based on the 7 days, dependent upon what your salary is.
They played a game
so
there
it's a
in
percentage.
January, though, too.
Okay.
Maybe this year.
Okay, with whatever. Well, the Super Bowl specifically, these guys. Jamie's so funny.
This is not. I know, but this is one of those things that's not real.
What do you mean it's not real? I told you it was run through AI last night. He made $178,000 for the Super Bowl. He had to pay $249,000 in tax. I'm pretty sure those are the numbers. And it's based on the fact that he was there for 7 days.
When there's fact-checking or even small pushback, the reaction can come off sharper, quicker, and way more emotional than expected. That's where the imbalance starts to stand out. The intensity is still there, no question, but it's being used in situations that don't really match what the audience is focused on. And people notice that disconnect fast. You can see a similar pattern in how he deals with critics like Mark Moran. There's no hesitation there. He responds, reacts, and leans into it. But when the conversation shifts to bigger political figures or high-stakes topics, everything tightens up. The tone gets more controlled, more careful, and sometimes noticeably quieter. That contrast is hard to ignore, especially at his level. Because when you have that much influence, consistency isn't optional, it's expected. The bigger the platform gets, the more every single move matters, including the choice to stay quiet. And that's what this whole situation really puts under a spotlight. It's not just about one episode or one guest. It's about what happens when influence, politics, and public expectations all collide at the same time. At that level, people aren't just listening casually anymore. They're analyzing everything from every angle. Not just what's being said, but what's being left out too. Rogan built his brand on open conversation, but that only works if it actually feels open. The second people start thinking certain topics are being filtered, even a little, that foundation starts to shift. It doesn't fall apart overnight, but it definitely changes. And once that shift happens, the connection between creator and audience changes right along with it.
Well, it seems to be a part of what he wants to accomplish in these 4 years, is that he wants to go down as having made significant change in the world in a positive direction.
And we're seeing it, whether people want to admit it or not.
That's part of the problem because of narratives.
That's it. You know, peace between India and Pakistan doesn't fit in the Democratic Party's narrative that Donald Trump is a warmonger. He's not a warmonger.
Because at the end of the day, the biggest risk here isn't controversy, it's selective silence. And right now, that silence is exactly what people are locked in on. Now with Donald Trump making moves that are raising tensions internationally, the spotlight on Rogan gets even brighter. It's not just about what he thinks, it's about whether he's willing to actually say it out loud. Not too long ago, Rogan was framing Trump as someone who leaned more toward ending conflicts than starting them. That idea came up again and again in conversations with guests. It became part of the bigger narrative surrounding Trump, and Rogan played a role in pushing that perception. But when reality starts pulling in a different direction, that's when the pressure hits. Moments like this are when a platform that big is expected to respond, no hesitation. But based on the pattern lately, it's honestly not clear that's going to happen. If anything, the recent trend points the other way. When major stories break, especially involving political figures he's been connected to, the tone doesn't get sharper. It gets tighter, more controlled, and way more measured. And that shift isn't just about what's being said. It's also about what isn't. It shows up in how conversations are shaped, what gets highlighted, and what quietly gets left out. That pressure doesn't just disappear, it shifts, and you can spot it in moments that have nothing to do with big political topics. Take his exchange with Roger Avery, for example. It started as a light, fringe idea, something that would usually be joked about or explored for fun. But it turned tense fast. Rogan cut it off quickly, jumped in repeatedly, and brought a level of seriousness that didn't really match the moment. On its own, that might not seem like a big deal, but when you zoom out, it starts to fit into a bigger pattern. Because when someone known for open conversations starts shutting down even low-stakes topics, it signals that something deeper is shifting. This isn't just about avoiding one subject anymore. It's about a change in how conversations are handled across the board. And that difference stands out even more when you compare it to how things used to be. There was a time when Rogan's podcast felt unpredictable in a good way, not because it was chaotic, but because it was open. Conversations could go anywhere, ideas could be tested, challenged, or even entertained for a moment without getting shut down right away. That freedom was a huge part of what made the show stand out. Now the tone feels tighter, more structured, and sometimes more limited. And you can see that same pattern when it comes to topics connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Whether it's talks with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or even figures like Adam Perry Lang, the approach stays the same. The subject just doesn't come up at all. No reframing, no pushback, no exploration, just silence. And at this point, it doesn't come off as random anymore. It feels deliberate, and that brings everything back to one central issue: control. Because when a platform gets as big as Rogan's, control becomes unavoidable and way more visible. Every decision matters, every omission stands out, and longtime listeners start picking up on even small changes. And once that awareness kicks in, it doesn't just stay inside the podcast, it spreads fast. This shift isn't just inside the podcast, it's spreading throughout the whole ecosystem. Even communities built around Rogan's content, like his subreddit, are showing the same patterns. Tighter moderation, stricter controls on discussions, and limits on certain topics all feed into the sense that the space isn't as open as it used to be. And once that idea takes hold, it changes everything. Engagement shifts, trust shifts, and even growth starts to slow down. While Rogan is still one of the biggest names in podcasting, there are signs that the momentum isn't what it once was. Outside of Spotify, rankings have begun to level off, or dip a bit. That doesn't mean the platform is collapsing, but it does show that it's no longer moving in the same direction it used to. And that's the real story here. This isn't about a single episode, guest, or missed question. It's about how a platform evolves once it's tied to larger systems of influence. Political, cultural, and social pressures all collide, creating a version of the platform that feels different from what originally drew the audience in. For some fans, that shift won't matter. For others, it changes everything. The appeal of Rogan's podcast was never just about who he had on. It was the sense that anything could be discussed, challenged, or explored without restriction. Once that freedom starts to fade, even a little, people notice. And that's exactly what's happening now. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to hit that like button so more people see it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and your support means everything. Drop your thoughts in the comments too. Do you think Joe Rogan is really changing? Or is this just what happens when a platform grows too big to stay the same?